Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Our mission here is to take stacks of sources, analyze the evidence, and deliver the essential insights directly to you.
Today, we are undertaking a pretty unusual deep dive.
It really is. We're looking into an unsettling paradox, a story that when you map it all out, it really challenges our fundamental understanding of what a company even is.
Exactly. We're tracing what you could call an operational ghost.
A ghost is the right word for it. This was a multi-billion-dollar entity, a huge, successful organization that existed in the real world.
It moves staggering amounts of money.
Staggering. And it engaged with some of the world's biggest, highest-profile corporations. And then it just vanished.
Without a trace. No warning, no press release, no bankruptcy filing.
Yeah.
Just ceased to exist.
And the focus here is so critical, isn't it? We need to be clear with everyone listening.
Yes. We are not tracking a typical case of financial fraud that fell apart or some startup that failed because of incompetence.
Yep.
We are analyzing the operational structure of a successful entity. An entity that was, from what all the evidence suggests, designed from day one to be untraceable.
Designed to be transient.
Precisely. And our sources are, well, they're fragmented. We have invoices, server data that's been verified but is still mysterious. Eyewitness accounts from former employees.
And some very detailed observations from forensic financial analysts.
Right. But the crucial thing is, all these little pieces of fragmented evidence, they're perfectly consistent. They all confirm the company was real. While
at the same time, every regulatory database in the world confirms its absolute, total non-existence.
A complete contradiction.
It creates this overwhelming tension. You have to think about the sheer logistical scale required here.
It's a financial scale.
We're talking about an operation that could handle billions of dollars. It could build and outfit real physical infrastructure across multiple continents.
Employ highly specialized people.
And yet, somehow, it managed to keep its entire existence completely outside the view of corporate law, tax authorities, regulatory bodies. All of them.
It forces you to look beyond simple evasion. This wasn't just a sloppy attempt to hide.
No, this was surgical. It was precise. It was a systematic erasure.
It's that precision, the precision of the disappearance that really shifts the analysis. You move away from just a criminal investigation and towards something else.
Something like institutional design.
Exactly. The trail isn't just cold. It was, for lack of a better word, sterilized. Everything we found points to the fact that this ghost company did what it was set up to do. It executed its purpose.
And the final act wasn't a collapse.
No. It was a highly sophisticated, controlled termination.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we're going to approach this with the calm forensic analysis it really requires, we have to start at the beginning.
Have the central conflict.
The overwhelming evidence of its reality versus the absolute total lack of any official documentation.
So, the initial alert, the first time anyone noticed something was wrong, it didn't come from a regulator?
Not the SEC, not the FBI.
No, nothing like that. It emerged from the painstaking work of investigative journalists and some financial researchers.
And they weren't even looking for a phantom company, were they?
Not at all.
Yeah.
They were initially following completely unrelated high-value contracts. They were just trying to figure out where huge sums of money were flowing and, who the ultimate recipient was. Just standard financial journalism.
So they're following the breadcrumbs, but then the name on the official paperwork, it just doesn't match the name on the operational accounts.
It doesn't match anything. They find all this tangible proof that confirms this company's economic reality, but no legal reality to back it up.
And that's the core of it, right? Because if you have no corporate registration, you shouldn't be able to transact at this level. You shouldn't be able to open a bank account, let alone move billions.
You shouldn't. But the evidence of its economic activity was just. It was undeniable. We have confirmed invoices.
Issued to who?
To and paid by massive multinational corporations. We have bank ledger records showing substantial wire transfers.
How substantial are we talking?
Sometimes in the 8-figure range. Tens of millions of dollars in a single transfer.
Wow.
And crucially, we also have verified technical data, server log records that indicate specific operational periods, geographical IP locations.
So this shows the entity was using real functioning, and it sounds like highly secured server farms.
Exactly. The company was demonstrably purchasing goods and services on a massive scale.
And that distinction is so important to stress, the existence of a physical and economic footprint.
Right.
This wasn't some purely digital phantom, like a crypto scheme that only exists on a blockchain.
No, this was a company that required real Material resources. Vendors confirmed they executed substantial contracts.
What kind of things were they buying?
Everything from highly specialized software to physical security equipment for their offices.
And maybe the most surprising detail, for an operation supposedly designed for stealth. Former contractors reported being paid.
And they were paid on time. Consistently. Over extended periods.
Which is a hallmark of institutional financial stability, isn't it?
It is. I mean, in the world of black market or fly-by-night operations, cash flow is usually the first thing to go.
Right. You get angry suppliers, unpaid employees, and then someone becomes a whistleblower.
And that's how they get caught.
Yeah.
But the fact that our sources confirm these reliable, consistent payments, it suggests not only immense wealth, but a high degree of operational professionalism.
And a deep cash reserve.
A deep cash reserve designed to maintain that stability until the mission was complete. This company was meticulously managed to succeed, not to fail or collapse prematurely.
And yet, when you take all these solid proofs, the dated invoices, the verifiable bank transfers, the vendor confirmations, and you run them through the official systems.
A complete void.
You run them through government registries in various countries, traditional corporate filing systems.
And the result is a consistent, total blank. It was a global negative. No formal registration in the U.S., no legally recognized corporate entity in any of the major European financial centers.
Not even in known offshore tax havens.
Nothing. No established presence. It defied all logic. Even the most complex shell company structures, they eventually lead back to some form of official paperwork.
Some breadcrumb, a bearer share document, a nominee director, something.
This company had zero legal source.
Yeah.
It was, quite literally, an echo in the global financial system with no originating point.
The difference, then, between a company that collapses and what happened here, it's profound.
A collapse leaves a trail, a massive paper trail. Bankruptcy filings, liquidators, angry creditors, regulatory inquiries that can go on for years.
This vanishing act, it leaves only the memory of the work that was done.
And the sudden, instantaneous absence of the entity itself. The operational documentation didn't slowly degrade or get lost. The flow of contracts, invoices, communication, it all just ceased. Abruptly, simultaneously, and consistently across every single line of inquiry. This uniform stop is powerful forensic evidence.
What does it suggest to you?
It suggests the entire operational timeline was capped from the very beginning. It had a defined start date and a programmed end date.
And when journalists went looking, when they pursued the last known physical addresses, the last active email domains,
they didn't just find abandonment. They found official records that actively contradicted the visual reality.
What do you mean?
Addresses that had shown satellite evidence of operational activity just days before were suddenly listed in official town registries as vacant. Or even weirder, they were suddenly assigned to completely unrelated entities that had been defunct for years.
So it's almost as if the legal record was being cleaned in real time, in parallel with the physical exit.
That's a perfect way to put it. The evidence of what happened, that a massive, powerful organization operated and then disappeared, that evidence is overwhelming.
But the legal identity of who made it happen
is zero. Who incorporated it? Who provided the capital? Who is making the decisions? It's a complete black box. And that absence is the central defining mystery.
And that void leads us directly to the first major question that consumed the research community, right?
Yes. Once the sheer financial scale and the absolute lack of registration were confirmed, the focus just shifted dramatically.
We moved from trying to figure out what this company was
to asking the much deeper, much more unsettling question, who is this company really working for?
Because to maintain that level of opacity and to have that kind of operational budget, it requires institutional backing.
It has to.
A powerful backer capable of either operating completely outside the rules or, maybe more likely,
manipulating the global legal system to dictate the terms of its own existence and its own disappearance.
It suggests a purpose far beyond simple quarterly profits for some typical entrepreneur.
Oh, far beyond. When we move into the financial architecture, this is the part of the story that transitions the narrative from, a mystery to something that feels more like an institutional conspiracy.
Because financial analysts weren't just confirming that transactions happened. They were analyzing the methodology of the money movement itself.
And what they uncovered demonstrated a level of sophistication that just immediately ruled out amateur fraud or simple tax evasion.
And we have to emphasize the volume again. We're talking millions, often tens of millions of dollars, flowing frequently.
This wasn't low-level stuff. It wasn't, crypto evasion, using some obscure, unregulated exchange. This was high-volume fiat currency,
The backbone of the global economy.
moving through established, regulated international banking systems. The scale suggests legitimacy, but the mechanism just screams phantom.
And this mechanism, this methodology of financial obfuscation, this is where that surgical precision really becomes obvious.
The primary observation was the inconsistency. Funds never moved under a single, consistent, registered company name for the entire length of any transaction chain.
You used a great analogy before we started, tracking a river that constantly splits and relabels itself. Let's dive deeper into that technique because that is the scalpel here.
Okay, so if you imagine a legitimate transaction of, say, $50 million.
Right.
In a normal business interaction, that money moves from client A's account to vendor B's account. It's one wire. It's clean.
And it leaves a very clear trail.
A clear, easily audited trail. But in this case, that $50 million would leave client A's account. Maybe it was destined for a registered entity in Delaware. But before it even arrived, it was atomized. Broken into dozens of smaller transactions, sometimes 60 or more. These smaller payments were then instantly routed across multiple jurisdictions.
How fast are we talking?
A 48 to 72-hour window. The money would bounce from, say, Singapore to the Cayman Islands, then to Luxembourg. A whirlwind tour.
And critically, each one of those microtransactions used a different, legally distinct temporary corporate entity as the pay before they were all merged again somewhere else.
Exactly. Analysts identified a heavy use of what are known as special purpose vehicles, or SPVs, but they were deployed with an extreme velocity.
What does that mean, extreme velocity?
These vehicles, they're often temporary trusts or holding companies. They were incorporated, used for a single transactional layer, and then swiftly dissolved, sometimes just weeks later.
So that prevents any single entity from holding the money long enough to be flagged.
It prevents them from being flagged as the ultimate beneficial owner. The goal was to keep the transaction values just below the thresholds that would trigger immediate mandatory international regulatory reporting.
So they were targeting the internal bank reporting limits, the $100,000 or $250,000 flags.
They knew exactly where those lines were. That's why the sources describe this as professional, almost surgical, and not sloppy money laundering.
Because amateur operations make obvious mistakes.
They do. They miscalculate reporting limits, they use the same high-risk jurisdictions over and over, or they rely on large one-off cash transfers that are easy to spot.
This operation showed a deep, sophisticated understanding of international anti-money laundering, or AML, mechanisms.
It implies a deep, intricate, and very current understanding of how global financial reporting actually works. Not just the law as it's written, but the practical internal logic of major international banks and clearinghouses.
To consistently pull this off, without triggering automated alerts, you'd need more than just a good accountant.
You'd need expertise in banking protocols, and maybe even privileged insight into how different jurisdictions comply with regulations. Or, more importantly, how their compliance systems fail to communicate with each other in real time.
Creating these little transactional gaps that can be exploited.
Exactly. Which brings us back to that crucial argument about institutional backing.
Because to maintain this architecture, the constant creation and dissolving of SPVs across multiple, often highly regulated jurisdictions, that requires constant legal and accounting overhead.
It's immense. This wasn't a clever individual who hired one smart lawyer. This required sustained resources and a team of highly specialized personnel.
Corporate formation experts, banking regulation specialists, legal teams who are familiar with these sophisticated regulatory circumvention techniques on a global scale.
Precisely. The cost of maintaining this financial structure alone would bankrupt a legitimate company that's focused on profit.
But for this phantom company, that cost was just a necessary operational expense?
The price of absolute invisibility. It suggests the financial system wasn't being circumvented by luck. It was being expertly exploited by actors who understood it so intimately they could disappear inside its own legitimate mechanisms.
So the goal wasn't just to hide the money.
The goal shifted. It was to hide the true owner and the true purpose of that wealth.
So we have confirmation that the transactions were real. They were massive. They were highly structured. This confirms the entity's power and its wealth. But because of this layered complexity, the constant splitting, rerouting, relabeling, we are missing two critical things.
We're missing the complete financial history. We don't know the full scope of transactions over its entire multi-year operational period.
And even more crucially, We're missing the ultimate destination of the billions generated by this shadow enterprise.
That final piece of the puzzle. Where did all that money ultimately settle when the music stopped? That remains the single greatest unknown in this entire investigation.
Okay, so to really appreciate the depth of this organizational effort, we have to shift our focus a bit.
Away from the intangible digital and financial trails.
And toward the company's solid physical presence. Because despite having zero corporate identity, this ghost company was very much grounded in the real world.
It had to be. It required complex physical infrastructure to house its operations and its staff.
And former employees confirmed this. They said they didn't work out of, some co-working space or a shared virtual office.
No, they described secure, organized, and physically robust offices, sometimes spanning multiple floors in major commercial buildings.
They had real security protocols, often using state-of-the-art access control systems. They were issued physical ID badges.
This all confirms they required a controlled, highly specialized, and very secure environment to do whatever it was they were doing.
Yes, and the irony here is that these locations, they were substantial enough, we're talking entire data centers or large regional headquarters, to be captured and identified on commercial satellite images.
Which proved their temporary physical reality. But the contradiction just got deeper when investigators tried to correlate that visual evidence with public records.
So we have undeniable visual proof of a thriving commercial operation. But when investigators called up the local municipalities or the utility providers or property registries,
the records consistently contradicted that reality.
How did they manage to achieve that level of operational camouflage on the ground?
They mastered the art of concealing tenancy. Addresses that clearly showed operational activity were listed in official registries as vacant.
Or they were assigned to unrelated, sometimes already defunct entities.
Right. And the method they used wasn't direct leasing. They relied heavily on short-term leasing through layers of property management groups.
And these groups were often just incorporated for the purpose of holding that one specific lease.
For a 3 or 6 month period. They would pay a significant premium, we're hearing sometimes 30 to 40% above the market rate, to ensure the flexibility of a short-term, renewable, and highly confidential lease agreement.
That speaks volumes about the level of pre-planning and just the sheer expense required.
The cost must have been astronomical.
They were actively hiding their physical location, not just from the public, but from the official record keepers themselves.
They were exploiting legal structures designed for short-term corporate needs for temporary project teams, but they were using them as their standard operating procedure for a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year entity.
And that administrative overhead managing constant high-turnover leases, making sure zero utility accounts were in their actual operating name, maintaining the legal structure to continually hide their tenancy on a global scale, it must have been enormous.
And yet that immense organizational cost was just absorbed willingly.
This intentional transience is maybe the most unique aspect of the whole operation.
I agree. Sources confirm that no long-term leases, meaning anything over 1 year, were ever established. Ever.
And critically, no permanent business licenses were ever secured, even in places where local law absolutely required them for continuous operation.
A traditional legitimate company, it prioritizes stability. They invest in a permanent headquarters, they secure multi-year licenses, they build long-term relationships with utility providers and municipalities.
This company actively and strategically avoided every single one of those standard procedures.
Which really forces us to reframe the analysis.
Yeah.
This wasn't a company that accidentally failed to become permanent.
It made the active, strategic decision to reject it entirely. The analysis is that the company never planned to stay long enough to be documented by any local or national authority.
It was built to move.
Not to grow in the traditional sense of anchoring itself to a specific location or a legal identity. The cost of mobility was just the cost of doing business.
This organizational decision to prioritize transience over efficiency, that is the key to understanding the company's entire philosophy.
Because every physical move, every temporary lease, every short-term contract, it's a self-imposed limitation on your operational efficiency. It's a massive cost driver.
But that cost was deemed acceptable. It was necessary. Because transience was the company's core firewall against any kind of exposure. The goal was to set up execute a specific task, and then liquidate the physical footprint so rapidly that it didn't leave the documentary evidence that defines a normal corporate identity.
And if you think about the human capital aspect, that just adds another layer of complexity.
How do you manage that?
Right. How do you manage specialized personnel, maintain high security, and ensure operational secrecy when your office might just move or vanish with 3 weeks' notice? It's nearly impossible in a traditional setting.
It reinforces the idea that the operational mandates were highly specialized and discrete. They were structured for defined projects.
Set up the office, execute the mission, and dismantle the physical reality immediately afterward.
Always ensuring a clean exit path was maintained.
So, to understand the true power and the potential purpose of this shadow company, we have to look outside its own shell.
And examine who it managed to engage with, because the operational scale and success of this entity required it to interact with, sign contracts with, and exchange massive funds with some of the world's most recognizable and seemingly legitimate corporations.
This is where the tension and the risk factor they elevate exponentially. The reported clientele included absolute household names.
We are talking about major, publicly traded tech firms, companies with immense public scrutiny, stringent compliance requirements,
Especially regarding data security and vendor registration.
and major infrastructure providers, the entities responsible for, national grid stability, communication networks, the physical systems that underpin modern society.
And maybe the most disturbing category, defense-adjacent contractors.
Entities that often deal directly with sensitive governmental data and international security concerns. They're subject to incredibly strict regulations.
So the fact that these highly regulated corporations were willing to engage and to pay an entity with no legal paper trail, it suggests a couple of inescapable conclusions.
1. The ghost company offered a service so unique, so specialized, or so absolutely necessary that these legitimate corporate entities were willing to overlook the massive compliance risk.
And 2, which is maybe more chilling,
The contracts were arranged in a way that the clients believed their involvement was completely protected, maybe by layers of highly sophisticated legal buffers, a functional legal firewall.
this relationship creates a massive conflict for those legitimate clients. You have companies answering to shareholders, to regulators, often to government agencies.
And they are knowingly doing business with an organization that, as far as the world's legal system is concerned, does not exist.
The pressure must have been extreme when investigative journalists started trying to publicly connect the dots between this missing entity and these high-profile clients.
And this is exactly where we hit the unified non-response, the wall of silence.
When journalists reached out to every single one of these alleged clients, tech, infrastructure, defense adjacent, for confirmation about contracts, about services rendered,
Or even just general knowledge of the vanished company.
yeah,
The reaction was uniform and consistent across the board.
every single one declined to comment.
Everyone.
We need to analyze that carefully, because this is not just a standard no comment from a junior PR assistant.
No. In the corporate world, if a massive public accusation like this, that you knowingly contracted a multi-billion-dollar ghost entity, if that's false,
The legal team issues an immediate, strongly worded, and often litigious denial. You have to protect your reputation and shareholder value.
but here there were no outright denials. And crucially, there were no confirmations either. Just total synchronized silence from some of the most visible companies on the planet.
Analyzing that calculated silence suggests a very specific legal strategy was deployed.
It does. Had the claims been entirely baseless, denial would have been mandatory to maintain their fiduciary duty and corporate integrity.
So the silence strongly suggests 2 things. First, that these high-profile clients were, in fact, involved.
And second, that they had signed non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality clauses so strict, so sensitive, or potentially so complex regarding national security or market-moving information that their only viable legal option was to refuse all acknowledgement, even under intense public pressure.
Silence, particularly when it's advised by the high-priced corporate lawyers who handle these clients, is almost never an accident.
No, it signifies protection, confidentiality, or an acute fear of legal and regulatory exposure that outweighs the damage of appearing complicit in a mystery.
The implication is that these major corporations were involved in something they could never publicly admit to, even if they benefited immensely from it.
And the source documents indicate that the sheer consistency of that silence, the refusal to even acknowledge the existence of any vendor matching the description, That's the largest component of the shield protecting the ghost company's purpose.
It's an effective legal firewall, but it's one provided by the established corporate world. So we've confirmed who they worked with, which validates the scale and the importance of this operation. But the core problem remains.
The specific nature of the contracts, the services that were actually provided, it all remains completely unknown.
Hidden behind this coordinated, legally enforced silence, did they provide highly specialized, untraceable data analysis?
Did they serve as a unique, non-public procurement channel for sensitive hardware?
Were they a kind of legal firewall for highly risky operations that required immediate deniability?
We simply don't know. And the refusal of the clients to speak ensures that this missing information remains the greatest barrier to understanding the company's true mission.
And as we move toward the final chapter of this forensic ghost story, we arrive at the disappearance itself, the moment the ghost company executed its final protocol.
And this was not a sudden financial implosion or a panicked flight. It was a deliberate, rapid, and systematic sequence of events.
A planned termination, not a catastrophic collapse.
Let's chronicle the final timeline of erasure. It was systematic and highly controlled. The digital assets went dark first.
And that's crucial because digital operations are typically the hardest thing to erase permanently. They leave latent files, metadata, persistent server records.
Right. Analysts believe the servers weren't just unplugged. They were likely subjected to highly specialized data wiping protocols, maybe military-grade scrubbing, before they were finally powered down for good.
And that digital eradication was followed immediately by the end of all communication.
All of it. Email domains stopped responding. Phone lines were instantly disconnected. The robust professional communication channels that had been fully functional just days before simply ceased to exist.
No out-of-office replies, no mailbox full messages.
Just silence.
And the human impact was immediate and chilling, yet it was incredibly tidy from an organizational standpoint.
Crucially, no formal announcement or press release was ever issued. No explanation was given to the external world. And critically, none was given to the internal staff.
Employees just arrived at locked doors,
finding themselves instantly unemployed. They received no severance pay, no documentation for tax purposes, and no official explanation for the sudden cessation of the multi-billion-dollar enterprise they had worked for.
Wait, let's pause on that. If they were professional enough to maintain perfect on-time payments to vendors and contractors for years, why wouldn't they have factored in a month's severance pay or just a simple notification? Doesn't the lack of that basic corporate responsibility make the Vanishing Act look less like a professional mission completed and more like a simple theft of labor?
That's a really strong point. But the analysis suggests the lack of severance was actually a deliberate feature, not a simple oversight or an act of malice.
How so?
Think about it. Providing severance, filing unemployment claims, issuing W-2s or the equivalent tax forms.
Yeah.
All of that would require regulatory filings, interaction with government agencies.
It would create exactly the paper trail this company was designed to avoid.
Exactly. They risked local labor disputes because the larger mission demanded a rapid absolute exit and complete deniability.
A conventional corporate closing would require filing notices, engaging with lawyers for months, maintaining corporate existence during the wind-down phase.
All processes that generate unerasable public records. The decision to cut off employees instantly saved the company from leaving that critical paper footprint.
The cleanup effort, though, is the most striking evidence of deliberate control and of sustained resources after the operation had already ceased.
Yes. Within weeks of the physical and digital shutdown, this meticulous cleanup effort continued on the digital periphery. Even archived web pages, third-party records, and cached versions stored by search engines and internet archives, they started disappearing.
And that detail is deeply unsettling. Cached web pages don't just vanish on their own.
They don't. They require active legal pressure, persistent digital removal requests, and specialized services to be eradicated from the internet's memory.
This confirms a continuous post-operational cleanup effort by the institutional backer long after the physical offices were vacated and the employees sent home.
It demonstrates an ongoing commitment to historical revisionism.
The interpretation of the experts, then, is unified on this point. This was not a failure. It was not a bankruptcy where the owners fled due to mismanagement.
It was a successful execution of a predefined operational mandate. It was, in their words, a mission completed.
The company finished its purpose, whatever that purpose was, and when it was no longer needed, it executed a pre-planned, successful self-eradication protocol.
Systematically erasing every possible point of exposure, financial, physical, digital, and legal. The chilling final reality is that the company didn't collapse under financial strain or regulatory pressure. It finished its work and was deliberately and surgically unwritten from history.
We are left then with the definitive story of a high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar operation that confirms the stark limitations of public records and regulatory oversight.
Especially when they're faced with overwhelming financial and legal expertise designed specifically to exploit them.
So let's recap the major gaps that remain,
Yeah.
the questions that continue to drive investigative interest.
Well, first and foremost, the identity of the ultimate institutional backer. The party with the resources and the influence to afford this level of guaranteed invisibility, that remains completely unknown.
And we still have no specific definition of the mission or purpose that would justify the staggering, frankly non-economical cost of maintaining absolute transience and opacity.
And perhaps most significantly, the precise role of those high-profile clients, the global tech, infrastructure, and defense-adjacent firms, that remains obscured by a total, coordinated, and legally enforced corporate silence that acts as an impenetrable shield.
You know, we're often taught a core comforting philosophy in finance and journalism and investigation.
That large companies always leave records, that money always leaves indelible trails, and that history can always be uncovered if you just look hard enough.
This case fundamentally challenges that assumption. It forces us to confront the reality that when the backing is powerful enough and the design is meticulous enough, those trails can be severed.
Those records can be avoided entirely, and a history can be successfully unwritten.
The really unsettling reality here is that this case suggests the global system of corporate governance and financial transparency. It isn't necessarily broken or failing to register these events.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this model of erasable enterprise may, in fact, be working exactly as it was designed to.
For who?
For actors who require absolute, untraceable deniability for sensitive, high-value operations. The architecture of global finance, which relies on this assumption of transparency, it seemed to contain sophisticated escape hatches.
For those who know where to find them.
And who have the institutional resources to exploit them continuously.
The final provocative thought, then, is this. What are the broader, more chilling implications if this model, the highly professional, highly solvent temporary corporation, is scalable and repeatable?
We're left to wonder how many other successful multi-billion-dollar missions are currently being executed by companies that were never intended to be remembered.
Operating invisibly right under our noses. This is the unsettling reality we are left with.